But the early years of the Roosevelt administration saw a great upheaval of the working class. The election of Roosevelt brought hope, but the working class could not eat hope, and they could not afford to wait. Hunger, starvation, and desperation demanded action. In 1932, it was estimated that about 75% of the population was living at or below the poverty line. It was the great working class upheaval that came soon after the elections that sent alarm bells off in the boardrooms of Wall Street and brought concessions from the Roosevelt administration. It was not Roosevelt's election that brought the concessions, but the class struggle of the workers that put the fear of God into the 1%. Or more accurately, the fear of godlessness. Yeah. The bonus march of 1932 organized over 25,000 veterans to D.C., coming on foot from everywhere to demand early payment of a promised bonus to veterans. This multinational march was called by Communist Party and other socialists and occupied part of Pennsylvania Avenue for months. It was violently suppressed by the U.S. Army led by General Douglas MacArthur, turning whips and horses on the veterans, their wives, and children. But the anger only grew, and things were about to change. The long, hard work by the CP and other left and progressive organizations, the patient agitation, the anti-racist work, all the preparation and earlier struggles gave way to a new, angry, determined working class movement that could not be stopped by anti-communist propaganda, arrests, beatings, or shootings. Despite the ravaging unemployment, a great strike wave engulfed the country. In 1933, nearly 1 million workers went on strike. This is despite 25% unemployment. In 1932, nearly 2 million. The first sit-down in the U.S. was at the Hormel Packing Company in Minnesota in 1933. After the workers occupied the plant for only 3 days, the company agreed to recognize the union and bargain for better wages. The movement grew. In 1936, there were 48 different sit-down strikes. In 1937, there were 477, according to official figures. For example, For example, in Detroit alone, workers occupied every Chrysler factory, 25 auto parts plants, 4 downtown hotels, 9 lumber yards, 10 meatpacking plants, 12 laundries, and 2 department stores. Can you imagine? Wow. The union drive was on. Of course, the greatest and most famous sit-down occurred at the General Motors plant in Flint, Michigan. It was led by communists and socialists with the support of the newly formed Committee for Industrial Organization, the CIO. GM refused to bargain with the union, so the workers were forced to sit in the factory to support the union drive and to prevent GM from moving parts and machinery out of the factory. The occupiers were supported by thousands of unionists, their wives and families, and by women who picketed outside to protect the strikers from attacks from fascist gangs and who smuggled food and other supplies to the strikers. Every day was a battle or confrontation with the police, with fascist thugs and finally the National Guard. But the strikers sent a message to the governor. Unarmed as we are, the introduction of the militia, sheriffs, or police with murderous weapons will meet a bloodbath of unarmed workers. We have decided to stay in the plant. Wow. After 44 days of occupation, fearful of an even greater struggle developing, GM gave in to recognize the United Auto Workers. Spontaneous strikes broke out in all over auto. In 1 year, the UAW membership grew from 35,000 to 375,000 in 1 year. Yeah, that's something. This was just the tip of the iceberg. There was also a tremendous general strike in San Francisco, which began against Shape-Up on the docks, but spread throughout the city after police fired into the crowd, killing at least 2 strikers. The Teamsters strike in Minneapolis was led by socialist workers who organized the workers in a long and successful struggle for union recognition. The local that initiated the strike was led by socialists until 18 were arrested in 1941 under the Smith Act for advocating the overthrow of the government. This was when the so-called workers' friend Roosevelt was still president, but by this time he was preparing the country for war. The Committee of Industrial Organization was founded because the old racist, craft unionist, collaborationist AFL refused to organize industrial workers. Since many industrial workers were relatively easy to replace on the assembly line, the AFL felt they could not be organized. The fact of the labor upsurge is testament to the solidarity that was felt in the working class. The spirit of solidarity was sweeping the country, and there was very little scabbing.